It is Sunday, May 15th, the year 2022. My name is John Molden, owner at Blood, Sweat, and Tears Concrete. I'm here with my co-hosts, Magnus and Carly Molden, and this is...
No Crying in Concrete.
Very good, guys. Magnus, what are we going to be covering this week?
Answers to your concrete questions.
That's right. And even more specifically, answers to your frequently asked concrete questions. Carly, what question will we be answering first?
How long should I wait before walking on my new concrete?
How long should I wait before walking on my new concrete? You know, nowadays we're doing mostly residential concrete, and we get done, we still rope it off, but, you know, we're pretty certain that nobody's going to come and walking along and step on our concrete when we're gone. But back when we were doing a lot of street work back in Minnesota, you never knew who was going to come walking through your concrete because they weren't paying attention, or because they were, you know, a bunch of kids waiting behind the tree to see if they could mark your concrete. But nowadays, you know, it's like I say, we're mostly residential, and we let our customers know that they can usually walk on the concrete the morning after we pour. We just say don't twist your feet too much when you're walking. And if it's like below 60 degrees Fahrenheit, you may want to wait until the following afternoon before you walk on it without twisting your feet. So Magnus, why do you think we ask people to stay off the concrete longer if the temperatures are cold?
Because it has to settle longer if it's colder.
Yeah, it has to set up longer. Yep, it takes longer. When the air temperatures get below 50 degrees, it really slows the hydration of the concrete down to almost nothing. So if it's getting down that cold at night, you're definitely going to have some really green concrete the next morning. So Carly, what's the next question?
How long should I keep my dog off my new concrete?
Yep. Now this one comes from 5-6 years ago when Travis and I were pouring a patio, and it wasn't terribly far from here, just across the valley. But we were pouring in that morning. We got everything laid out, and the homeowner stopped and talked to us before they left for the day. And they were asking, when can we let the dogs out, because they had them, you know, locked up in the house. And we told them, I should be fine to let them out tomorrow. Well, all through that day, the sun never hit that patio. It didn't get nearly as warm as it was supposed to that day, and it got really cold that night. And they went ahead and they let their dogs out like at 4 o'clock the next morning. And the dogs had a heyday. I mean, they like went to playing on that concrete. They were running and skidding along and tearing it up. I mean, way beyond what would just be, you know, conversation material. So they called us up 5 o'clock that morning. They called me, I called Travis. We headed over there right away with some burner trowels, and we were able to get out there and pretty much fix everything, made it look good. It was that green yet. It had, you know, the hydration had slowed down so much overnight that it was still workable the next morning. And from that point on, we've really kind of rethought the whole how long should I keep the dog off thing. So, you know, for your heavy dogs, it's best to keep them off for a minimum of 48 hours after the finishing is complete. So once we're done finishing and we leave, the clock starts 48 hours. Now, if you have a little dog, they could probably get on in 24 hours, as long as they're not prone to, you know, want to dig or use their claws a lot. But, you know, the longer you can wait, the better off you're going to be. What else do we do sometimes for the dogs to stay off there?
We put, like, fencing around?
Yep, that's the other thing. You can ask Orville about bringing some fencing, and maybe we can make it work where we can fence it off for a little while and just leave the fence up for the first 48 hours after finishing. So Magnus, what do you think Daisy would do if she got out on some fresh concrete? Think she'd be a good girl, or think she would tear it up?
She wouldn't be a good girl.
You don't think so? How about you, Carly? What do you think?
I think she would do one of two things.
Okay, what's that?
So she would either feel it and she'd feel it and it would feel all mushy, and she might get scared like she does on trampoline.
Yeah, kind of freaks her out.
Yeah, and then she'll either keep doing it, get right off it, or she may see something and then dart across it.
So, what is the third question we will need to answer tonight, Carly?
How long should I wait before driving on my new concrete driveway?
Before driving. And I know we've covered this one and another one, haven't we? Yeah. Kind of the same stuff over and over. So, for an average Tucson driveway, summertime temperatures, we normally recommend 1 week to 10 days for like a normal passenger vehicle if we're pouring a 4,000 psi mix. If we're in the cooler weather with a 4,000 psi mix, we're going to say 10 to 14 days. And then if we're using a 3,000 psi mix, you can add 3 days to either one of those. The one thing that works well to really nail it down, just watch the color of the concrete as it cures out. It'll go through its phases, and once it's all pretty even, then you're definitely safe to drive on it for sure. So anyways, the only story I can think of here is when we were working in Minnesota a few years back. We did a driveway outside of a tire shop there, and we used a pretty high early concrete so they could get back on it quickly, and we made sure we told them plenty of time to stay off of it, and kind of followed all the guidelines that we normally do. But what we didn't really bring into consideration was that they were going to be driving forklifts on it, and what they were bringing in is tires, a lot of dirty stuff, getting a lot of stuff on the concrete, and as that dirt and gravel and small rocks fell on the concrete, and as the hard tires of the forklifts drove over it, it did do a little damage. It wasn't enough to need to be replaced really like that, but it did look kind of bad. It was really beating up that top surface. So I mean, even when you first do start driving on your driveway, the takeaway I got from that is try to keep the surface clean. Even if you're rolling off of gravel onto the concrete driveway, sweep it off, keep it nice and clean, because if you're driving into those rocks, it's going to do a lot more damage to your driveway than just your tires. So Magnus, what's the worst thing that can happen if a person drives on their concrete too early, do you think?
The concrete could possibly break.
Yeah. It could break, couldn't it? Kind of like that flower pot that Sissy did, She, it wasn't her fault. I told her to do it, but we had all these poured at the same time. Hers was the biggest one, thickest one. And these ones all stripped fine, and we were able to get them off because they were able to dry through well.
This one got a little cracked.
Yeah, no, it's still fine. It's just the way it was poured. But when we went to take hers out, a little too much pressure and the thing crumbled. So
it literally went into like powder.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. But that's the same thing. If you were to get on your, somebody drives on the driveway right after we poured it next morning, he could do the same thing. It could just break up. So that would be your worst case scenario for sure. So Carly, what's the fourth question we should answer?
How long should I wait before building on my concrete pad?
Yep. And this is the kind of heavily debated question I've noticed over the years. Every builder and general contractor seems to have their own formula for how to figure this out, but I always think of the time when we were doing a big house addition on Cherry Street. It was a colored floor foundation, finished floor, and we'd gotten done pouring it the day before. I was out there early that next morning, and all the framers were all sitting on the lumber piles waiting for me to put the control joints in it. So I got my saw fired up and I cut them all at 8 foot, both directions, and then I came back and started cutting all the 4 foot. It was going into 4 foot squares. And as soon as I got done finishing all the ones in one direction, they jumped up and they started building that wall on the edge of that brand new slab. And the GC was all on board with it, the framers were all on board with it. I'm just like going, man, you guys are just crazy. Because if you break that edge of that slab off at that critical time, even if you can patch it back together, it's just never going to have that same integrity again, And they were careful. They got it done without breaking it up. At least they didn't tell me if they broke anything off of there. But it was pretty crazy. And since then it really got me to have the conversation with our GCs and with our homeowners about when to build on it beforehand, so that we're not trying to rush that whole process. And if we're pouring with a 4,000 psi concrete mix, I like to say wait for 1 week to build on it. If you were using the 3,000 psi mix, probably wait 10 days to build on it. It'll be better. And if it's really cold out, add a few days of that. Add 3 days. So Magnus, why do you think people should wait longer to build on a 3,000 psi concrete than on a 4,000 psi concrete?
It's not as strong with a 3 psi concrete because it's not as thick. So if you drive a car on it sooner, it might break.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's basically it. The 3,000 psi is less strength. And you always want to look at kind of the 3-day cure. Or, what's your strength at in 3 days. And with the 4,000 psi, within the first 3, 4, 5 days, you're going to be hitting that 3,000 psi. The 4,000 is already going to be at a 3,000, where your 3,000 is going to be much less than that. So it does make a pretty big difference. Carly, what is the next very frequent question we get asked?
How long should I wait before placing my spa?
Yeah. And we do a lot of spa pads, lots of hot tubs, It's something we enjoy doing. It's a good little thing to fill in the gaps, and it's a big part of our business, really. And, we always, if we're using a 4,000 psi, everything's fully reinforced with rebar grid, 20 inches on center. We're going to tell the homeowner to wait for 1 week to 10 days. With a 3,000 psi concrete, with it partially reinforced, maybe just around the outside perimeter or something, 10 to 14 days should be enough. Get that psi up high enough to where you're feeling safe with it. And then obviously if it's below 60 degrees Fahrenheit, you should add at least 3 days to either of those numbers. So Magnus,
Yes.
Hot tubs by themselves really aren't all that heavy, right? So why do you think it's best to wait that long to place it on the pad? What is it that makes them heavy?
Water.
The water, yeah. Yeah, exactly. That water at 8 pounds per gallon really adds up, doesn't it? Yeah. Fortunately, it's a nice, they distribute weight really evenly. So, a week to 10 days, you're going to be just fine putting that much weight on your pad. So, Carly, what's the next question?
How long will it take for my concrete color to stop changing?
Yep. And we get a lot of questions regarding this from people who we've just poured the concrete for. A few days later, after it's poured, whether it's gray or whether it's got color in it, it goes through a really ugly phase, super ugly phase. You know, it's like when it first goes down, it never looks better. It's all dark, uniform, pretty, and then as it dries out, you start getting light spots. Little pebbles start lightening up, and everything gets really uneven and really ugly. And then in the last couple of years, it seems like we've had a lot more trouble with the efflorescence, the minerals coming out of the concrete, and leaving white spots here and there and everywhere. And that's a whole new thing. But you know, a couple months ago, we did a colored patio, and it had some pretty good sized efflorescent spots and a few dark areas that weren't curing out very nicely. And we sent Orville over there, and he did our normal scrub down, and it didn't take it off. It got a little better, but it didn't take it off. So he got some vinegar, and he got some distilled water. He scrubbed it all down again. It got a little better yet. And then the next step was going to be to hit it with muriatic acid and then neutralize it. But before doing that, we talked to the homeowner, and we said, let's just give it a couple weeks, see how it, you know, and evens out in the next couple weeks with that efflorescence. And so after 2 weeks, it was looking really good. It wasn't completely there yet, but it was looking a lot better. And then by the week after that, it had all evened out. They were super happy with it. So, you know, your color's going to change until the concrete's cured, basically, and maybe even a little beyond. But that normally happens in the first 28 days. But nowadays, with the you know, the admixtures, it can take up to 56 days. So Magnus,
Yes.
what kind of has to come out of the concrete completely before the concrete can have a true color to it?
Water.
Water, yes. You know, it's just like the last question, water, right? Same answer. But yeah, through the hydration process, the water gets used up. You know, anything extra leaves through the top of the concrete, and once it's kind of dried out, it's going to be the color that it's going to be forever. So Carly, what's the next common question?
How long does it take for my 4-inch thick concrete to cure?
Yep. And this, you know, this question for me for most of my life had a really simple answer. It was always 28 days. It'll be cured out in a month. I've been asked it 1,000 times in my life, you know, from different homeowners. And now that I'm in Arizona, and I was talking to the guys at Remus about it a while back, they informed me that it's no longer 28 days, not in Arizona anyways, because with the admixtures that go into it, it can take up to 56 days to fully cure, which, you know, it still hits that, you know, strength it needs to in the first week or so, and then it slowly cures out after that up to 56 days a lot of times, depending on the mix we're using, of course. But so Magnus, do you know what curing of concrete actually means?
Here.
You know what that means or no? Sounds kind of weird, huh? Like
Really bad.
I know. You'd think that it was like healing almost, wouldn't you? With, you know, the cure, like a cure to a disease, but it's not like that for this.
Maybe like to be completely set up.
That's more like it, isn't it? Yeah. So I've got the definition here from the American Concrete Institute. And according to them, curing of concrete is the action taken to maintain moisture and temperature conditions in a freshly placed cementitious mixture to allow hydraulic cement hydration and, if applicable, pozzolanic reactions to occur so that the potential properties of the mixture may develop. And that's your ACI concrete terminology. And now for the John Molden version. Curing of concrete is the period of time from mixing of concrete to the point at which it is fully cured. Cured concrete is concrete that has reached the PSI it is designed for and used up all the moisture in the hydration process to become hard. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Dad,
Yeah, bud?
in the spring it's kind of getting dark.
Yeah, it's getting dark outside, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, that's the way it goes, I guess.
the other one, so it's going to get darker later into the show because it's later.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess we should have turned some lights on in here.
Yeah.
So, Carly, what's our last question?
Do I need to wet my concrete down when it is hot out?
And this is a great question. You know, a lot of contractors recommend that their customers wet the surface down after they leave. And it's kind of a tried and true method that assures the slowing down of the set and gaining maximum strength of the concrete. So, I mean, it's not a bad thing to do. It's not a bad idea, but it also comes with risks. And the first risk we'll talk about here is when it's cool part of the year. Now, really, when it's a cool part of the year, there's no reason for your contractor to have you wet the concrete down. You know, it's going to cure out just fine on its own. Temperatures are going to take care of it. But if they do tell you to spray it down, just be really careful. Make sure that you start in a corner or something where you can really see what's going on. Spray a little bit, watch really closely. If it's too early, you'll see that a real paper thin layer will start washing off the top. And if you see that happening, stop, wait, give it some more time, or just don't even do it at all. But that's one thing if it's too cold up. But the main danger here, of course, is when it's overly hot. When they get done finishing the slab, temperatures are on the rise. It's all in the sun. It's all heating up, and they tell you to spray the surface of that concrete. Back in 2010 or so, we did a patio, pretty good sized patio, and back then we were kind of still putting the crew together. We really hadn't figured everything out quite yet then. A lot of people were just trying out. It was early in the company, and we got this patio down. Turned out really nice. I started picking up tools. A bunch of us picking up tools, and one of the finishers we had that day took it upon himself to grab the hose and start spraying down the concrete. And I turned around just in time to see him spraying it down, and a big old crack shot right across that patio the whole way. And that's an example of thermal cracking, and that's your biggest risk. If you're spraying the slab while it's in the part of the day where the heat is coming up, where that temperature is rising. Now I know Uncle Dude, he recommends people wet their slab down often, but he'll always tell them to wait until in the evening when the temperatures are on the drop, when the sun is low on the horizon and it's cooling down for the day. That's when you can spray it on there. But you definitely don't want to spray it when it's the hot part of the day. We found that out for sure. So from that point on, we decided to take a different approach. We're not going to have you wet your concrete down at all. With the chemicals that are in the concrete here in Tucson, the curing is slow enough. All we have to do is our job right on our end. So as long as we wet your grade down real well the night before and the morning of, and as soon as we get done finishing, right behind the finish, we're putting a breathable curing seal on, and we feel comfortable giving you the warranty that we've agreed to, as long as we do it that way. So you won't have to spray your concrete down with us. So this is going to be our last episode of season number 1. We'll see you on Sunday nights, possibly again in September, October. So anytime you can ask a question on Facebook or send me an email or shoot me a text message, whatever. I appreciate that. We'll definitely get some blog posts out for you covering any questions you have. Well, thank you for taking the time to watch again this week. We'll be back next fall from the backyard kitchen answering questions you didn't know you needed to ask about concrete. Remember, there's no crying in concrete other than
The tears of joy brought about by a job well done.
awesome. Say goodbye, guys.
Bye.